August was a pretty big reading month. I read 9 books. The books that I read were from a pretty wide variety. I read 2 YA books, 2-ish short story collections, 3-ish adult fiction novels, and 2 nonfiction novels. The newest book that I read last month was published in 2013. It was the first book that I read this year. It was actually published in this year, and the oldest book that I read was published in 1845. So, good span of time, So we're going to start with 2 YA books that I read. Prodigy by Marie Lu, also the newest book that I read. I would recommend the Legend series if you like the YA dystopia trend. If you hate the YA dystopian trend, I don't think that this is a series that's necessarily going to change your mind. For me, I like dystopian books, but I have a number of reservations with this current trend that's going on. I have 2 problems that I can boil it down to. One problem is, who the hell would think that's a good idea? Now, obviously, it's a dystopia. It's a bad idea to run society that way. It's obvious, but maybe it's only benefiting like the 3 people who are in power and everyone else has a shit life, something like that. Or what they did was good in the short term but not in the long term, or it used to make sense in one context but the times have changed and now it no longer makes sense. Something I need to be convinced that somebody felt the need to make society like this, and that is somewhat understandable. Second problem is that that's not a dystopia. It's an inefficient way to run society, but it's not really that bad. And I can think of 2 books off the top of my head that just, the original ideas were so weak or just weren't there really, that mind control was just thrown into the book at the end to make things bad. And I'm not down with that. So yeah, I do like Prodigy. Yeah, I was really excited to read it. I liked reading about the different classes, and there was world building. There was not a lot of world building in the first book, which I think that was its biggest weakness. And this one made up for that. There were maps going on there. You open the book and there's a map. At some point in the book, someone looks at a world map and things are explained, and it was glorious. I loved learning about all those things. So you learn more about how things came to be. I think that the weakest part is one specific character. I'm sure if you read the book you would know who the hell I'm talking about. They were a big pain in the ass. And I think that there was some really bad writing there. I don't think that that person's role went beyond making someone else feel guilty about something that they shouldn't feel guilty about. The second YA book that I read last month was Ash. You would think lesbian retelling of Cinderella that she would run off with a princess instead of the prince, but it didn't happen like that. It's not like she ended up with someone who she barely knew, who she danced with a couple of times, and that person saves her from her miserable life. We do actually get to know the female love interest, and I actually quite liked her. Next up, short story collections. Now, the first book that I'm going to talk to you about, I had a hard time classifying it. My brother told me about it. He told me it was a short story collection from different points of views of people who all kind of live in the same area. But the back of the book says that it's a novel, and it kind of reads just like a novel with different points of views, but at the same time it's like the chapters could be read independently if you want to read them independently. So I was a bit confused, but then Wikipedia schooled me on short story cycles, and they classified this book as a short story cycle. So we're going with classifying it as a short story. Love Medicine by Louise Erdrich. Yeah, starts out in the 80s, then the next chapter goes into the 30s. Now it's like, no, I want to read more about what was going on in the 80s. But then I thought, I really like this character, Albertine, and her mom looks like she was once at this point in her life, but then she changed her mind, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. There must be a story there. But apparently not, because when we go back into the 30s, we read about this love triangle between the grandparents, and that was not my favorite part of the story. My favorite part of the story was, I actually saw some videos on YouTube of Louise Erdrich talking to people. In one video, she was talking to the Democracy Now! Woman about Leonard Peltier. I guess she wrote something that was loosely based on him or something. And there came a point in the book where I was like, hey, is some of that in this book? Because this looks a little bit familiar to me. That's all I'm going to say about that. Second short story collection. Oh, it was really good. It was called The Thing Around Your Neck by Chimamanda Adichie. When I got to The Thing Around Your Neck, the short story in The Thing Around Your Neck, I was a bit, I guess, thrown off. It was told in second person, and I'm not used to that, but once I got past that, that story ended up being my favorite. Last month, I tried to read a collection of Haruki Murakami short stories, Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman, and they just didn't do it for me. In The Thing Around Your Neck, there's a story called The American Embassy, and it's just about this woman staying in line. It's only a few hours out of her day, but by the end of the story, you know, like, all about her. You know what she was doing in that line. You know her whole story. And in Interpreter of Maladies, there was a story called Interpreter of Maladies. And it's about this guy giving a tour. By the end of the story, you know about his other job. He works at a doctor's office. He's a translator. He's an interpreter of maladies. And you know about the people that he's giving a tour to, and about their marital problems. And you just know so much about these people. You know, you read this little chunk out of their lives, and you end up caring so much about them. With Haruki Murakami, it was like, it would just be the story of someone staying in line or someone giving other people a tour with something weird thrown in. So I found that unsatisfying, and I thought, maybe if I read something bigger of his, then I'd enjoy it. I'd have more time to connect with the characters. I'd seen a documentary on YouTube, and I skimmed his Wikipedia page, and I decided that I wanted to read The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. Wikipedia told me it was one of his more socially conscious works, and I'm all about the social conscious literature. You don't even know. So yeah, I read that, and I liked it alright. There was a part when I was 400 pages in where I was pissed off. It wasn't coming to a climax, but I took a few days to calm down so that I can go back and accept whatever Haruki Murakami was doing. But I just came away from that experience wondering, what the hell did I miss? Everybody likes him. He's so popular. I don't understand what I missed. It was a story about this, like, house husband, and he's kind of normal, but he meets some people who are not normal, and they have some stories to tell that were very interesting to me, but I didn't see how all of those things kind of work together in the story. So, yeah, just came away quite confused. The second adult fiction book that I read also kind of confused me, but not in the same way that Murakami did, where I was wondering what the hell was I missing. Half of the Yellow Sun, which is also by Chimamanda Adichie, and I actually read a chapter back in like 2009 after I watched her Danger of a Single Story TED Talks video. I favorited it. I loved that video. I watch it still every once in a while. I thought that video was dynamite. And I actually got around to reading the whole thing, and yeah, the first half, loved it so much. I actually didn't know much about the time period and the war that was going on, so I got really excited in the book where I actually found out why it was called Half a Yellow Sun. Some things confused me in the second half, more when it came to like motivations of characters, that sort of thing. There was something like later on that happened that was really disturbing for me to read, and also confusing because I don't quite understand why that happened and shit. And yeah, I was just confused in terms of my feelings, but I do think that it's a good book and I recommend it. The last adult fiction book that we're going to talk about is On Beauty by Zadie Smith, and I read the majority of this book in March. And I was reading like 5 books at the time, and I set it down and read those other books, and I just didn't get around to reading the last little bit until now. There was actually a plot twist that made me a bit uncomfortable, and now that I've read the whole thing, I don't really agree with it being there because I don't think it was resolved very well. Oh yes, I continue to love Carl in the book. And Levi was just so funny. He's like this middle class mulatto who's hanging out with the lower class black kids, and he's pretending that he's not middle class and that he also lives in the hood. And I thought that was kind of funny. And for nonfiction, I read Narrative of a Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. I think that's the title. I was assigned to read that book in high school, and I was so bad in high school. I didn't read the books that were assigned to me, and I should have. So I got around to reading it now. It's not very long. It's like 150 pages. There's a really good line on reading because Frederick Douglass learned how to read when he was still a slave, and he realized that was his pathway to go from slavery to freedom. And I was like, man, that's such a great line, but I didn't mark it. I couldn't find it when I switched, and I like flipped through it afterwards, so you know, I can't quite share it with you guys, but there was a very good line that was on reading. In the next book that we're going to talk about, I'll show it now-ish. I want you to see if you can guess where it's from. Last night I finished the autobiography of Malcolm X. Oh my god, it was so good. I started tearing up at the end. I'm definitely going to have to reread that book again sometime. Best book that I read this whole year so far. The Detroit Red part dragged on for like 5 chapters, but it was all good. Yeah, it was a good month. I plan to read maybe not 9 books this month, maybe about 5 or 6, keep the momentum going, and yeah, that's about all.